to move to recognize the Honorable Lady from Iloilo in the Republic of the Philippines, no other than Senator Miriam.
Mr. Senate President, Mr. Speaker, and distinguished colleagues of this august Congress. All right. This week, we make history. For the first time, all three branches of government implement the constitutional provision on martial law. What we in Congress do this week could serve as precedent for generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen of the Congress, we are eyeball to eyeball with history. We start with certain premises. One premise is that a question of law should not be considered as a question of wisdom. Law, particularly the Constitution, is supreme. Duralex said let's, the law is law. The law must be upheld even if it entails heavy sacrifices. Another premise is that reading the Constitution is not a mere function of literacy. Reading and much more construing the Constitution is a technical skill. We have to follow the rules of constitutional construction collected from various Supreme Court decisions over the ages. The primary aid to constitutional construction is the language of the Constitution. Its words must be given their ordinary meaning. The primary objective is to carry out the intent of the people who ratified it. As the Supreme Court ruled, quote, the Constitution does not derive its force from the convention which framed it, but from the people who ratified it, period, unquote. My request to Secretariat to turn down the volume. I think the microphone is overworking. The intent of the people is gleaned from what the Germans call Zeitgeist, or the spirit of the age. In 1986, the people wanted an extremely restricted system of martial law in reaction to what had gone before. I humbly submit that the temper of those times provides the necessary corollary that, in case of doubt, the doubt should be resolved against martial law. Failure to meet the test for martial law. We are here dealing with martial law, which is not formally defined in the Philippine Constitution. And it is not even mentioned at all by the United States Constitution, our template. Permit me to use, therefore, this 1940 definition. Quote, martial law is the law of necessity. Necessity calls it forth. Necessity justifies its exercise. And necessity measures the extent and the degree to which it may be employed. That necessity is no formal, artificial, legalistic concept, but an actual and factual one. It is the necessity of taking action to safeguard the state against insurrection, riot, disorder, or public calamity. What constitutes necessity is a question of fact in each case. Martial law is the public right of self-defense against a danger threatening the order or the existence of the state. When the ordinary civil authorities, the police, are unable to resist or subdue a disturbance, additional force, military in nature, may be applied. The extent of military force used depends in each instance upon the extent of the disturbance, unquote. Hence, I humbly submit this general test for constitutional martial law. Is martial law a necessity for the existence of our state today? Answer, no. Is it a necessity for the existence of Maguindanao province? No. I further submit this particular test in contradistinction from the general test. Is there an actual rebellion? And does public safety require martial law in Maguindanao? Again, the answer is no. The Constitution imposes two conditions for martial law. There should be a state of actual rebellion. Actual, not imminent rebellion. And public necessity requires it. These conditions do not exist in Maguindanao today. The first condition, actual rebellion. The Penal Code defines the crime of rebellion as, quote, rising publicly and taking arms against the government for the purpose of removing from the allegiance to said government or its laws the territory of the Republic of the Philippines or any part thereof, or any body of land, naval, or other armed forces, or of depriving the chief executive or the legislature, wholly or partially, of any of their powers and prerogatives," unquote. In other words, rebellion is open, organized, and armed resistance to established government. If there is such a rebellion, why have we never seen such footage in the TV newscasts or on the internet? There should be two groups in the same area, the government troops versus the rebel troops, and they should be shooting to kill at each other. Show me the rebellion. Are we now adopting the new concept of a secret rebellion? That would be a contradiction in terms, an oxymoron, like a woman who is secretly pregnant. Proclamation number 1959, here known as Proclamation, does not even claim that there is a state of actual rebellion. Look at your report from Malacanang again. Except for the quotation of the constitutional provision, which of course mentions rebellion, there is no mention of rebellion in the whereas or introductory portion or justification for the forthcoming declaration, which is the proclamation of martial law. This omission itself is a fatal flaw. Instead, the proclamation claims that, quote, heavily armed groups in the province of Maguindanao have established positions to resist government troops, unquote. The Constitution does not impose the condition that heavily armed groups have established positions to resist. That's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution imposes the condition that there is an actual rebellion. It does not comply with the first condition. Furthermore, rebellion is a political offense, not a common crime. The essence of rebellion is ideological motivation, meaning the advocacy that existing government should be destroyed by removing citizen allegiance from it. I respectfully point out that where there is no ideological motivation, there is no rebellion. As explained by a 1995 Supreme Court decision, and I quote, "By its very nature, rebellion is essentially a crime of masses or multitudes involving crowd action which cannot be confined a priori within a predetermined bound. Its gravamen is an armed public uprising." Repeat, its gravamen or its essence is an armed public uprising. One aspect noteworthy in the commission of rebellion is that other acts committed in its pursuance are by law absorbed in the crime itself because they require a political character. Continuing with the decision of the Philippine Supreme Court, quote, "If no political motive is established and proved, the accused should be convicted of the common crime and not of rebellion." In cases of rebellion, motive relates to the act, and mere membership in an organization dedicated to the furtherance of rebellion would not by itself suffice. The crime of rebellion carries a lighter penalty than murder. Thus, it is imperative for our courts to ascertain whether or not the act was done in furtherance of a political end. And please pardon me, but we do not refer to our daily activities here in the legislative branch of government as political in the sense in which it is used here. Political here in the vocabulary of martial law means revulsion of the existing government compelled by a system of beliefs in the mind of an individual that it compels him to destroy that government. That is the meaning of political. It is not enough that overt acts of rebellion are proven. Please let me emphasize this quotation from our Supreme Court. Both purpose and overt acts are essential components of the crime. All right, let us assume, for the sake of argument, that what has been shown to us in the slides are overt acts of rebellion. But the language of the Supreme Court is categorical. You have to accompany it with the purpose to destroy the very institution of government in society. So I say again, since I have not heard any ideology aired in any of the three media that has been covering the Mindanao event for almost a month now. No one has ever shown or presented for me to read any statement on ideology by the so-called rebels. I say again, show me the rebellion. The second condition, public safety requires it. The Constitution does not define the term public safety, although it also uses this term to restrict the right to travel. In the light of this lacuna in the law, I humbly submit that the emphasis should be on the public nature of safety. The term public refers to the people of a nation or to a community as a whole. But crimes committed by warlords against each other are basically threats to the safety only of their respective camps. What they constitute are not threats to public safety per se. Dalawang gunggong nag-away sila eh. Bakit sabihin mo ngayon, napanganib na ngayon iyan sa safety ng publiko? Panganib sila sa isa't isa. What they constitute are not threats to public safety per se, but acts of terrorism defined by law as the commission of a major crime, quote, thereby sowing and creating a condition of widespread and extraordinary fear and panic among the populace in order to coerce the government to give in to an unlawful demand, unquote. The proclamation, unlike its omission to use the word rebellion, does use the term public safety, but in a way that, out of kindness, I shall call a non sequitur, or a conclusion that does not logically follow from its premise. The proclamation claims that, quote, the local judicial system and other government mechanisms in the province are not functioning, thus endangering public safety, unquote. I am so not understanding this. When government collapses, we call it anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E. We do not call it a threat to public safety in legal terms. Of course, if we don't know, if we don't have any basis or premise for our discussions, anything is possible. My understanding is we are discussing and debating this matter on the basis of law. The Supreme Court is the last resort. In the nature of democracy, party politics will intrude into this debate. If we in the Senate, or at least the majority in the Senate, fail to convince our colleagues in the House, then we are a sinking ship, and we will go down with this political Titanic. But the debate does not end here. It will go on to the Supreme Court. I take the attitude that the legal problem posed by martial law is not civilian control over the military, but judicial control over the executive and legislative branches, delegation of authority to the armed forces. For my part, I do not see martial law as a new order of society in Maguindanao or even the arm. Martial law is the future refusing to be born. I will vote to revoke martial law. Thank you.